Everett always noticed the small things. That's why the wrong bottle of wine, pulled too perfectly from a hidden shelf, told him everything. His wife wasn't just cheating. She was funding her lover's future with Everett's own money, but she didn't know Everett was watching. And when he finally moved, it wasn't with rage. It was with a plan. The first sign wasn't a lipstick stain or a suspicious text message. It was a pair of heels, sharp, deliberate, clicking down the hallway like a warning bell. Everett didn't ask why his wife was dressed like that. Not at first. He simply watched her adjust the clasp on her clutch, still applying gloss in the mirror. When he finally spoke, his voice came out calm, almost too calm. "You're really wearing that to dinner with a former colleague?" Sienna didn't flinch. "You make it sound like I'm heading to prom." Her tone was light, practiced. "It's just Malcolm." Everett said nothing. Just Malcolm hadn't been mentioned in over 5 years. The same Malcolm who barely registered when Sienna changed firms. And now she was walking out the door like she was going on a date with destiny. He stayed by the door as she left. She didn't kiss him goodbye. She didn't look back. The house felt quieter than usual. Not just empty, off. He didn't pour a drink, didn't turn on the TV, just sat near the window and stared at her parking spot. His mind didn't race. It calculated. That's what he did best. Everett was 38, a contracts analyst for a logistics firm in Omaha. He built his life on spotting small details others missed, misplaced numbers, patterns buried in noise. At work, it made him reliable. At home, it made him dangerous without ever raising his voice. He and Sienna had been married 6 years, no kids, just routines. Clean systems, shared folders, quiet nods and coffee refills instead of declarations. Love had become a rhythm, predictable. But that rhythm had shifted, and Everett was trained to detect shifts. Something had changed. He could have asked more questions. Could have called Malcolm, but he didn't. That wasn't his style. He didn't jump to conclusions. He gathered quietly. 3 days later, Sienna hosted a dinner. Her idea. Malcolm and his girlfriend Marissa were coming over. The setup was meticulous. Good plates, folded napkins, soft lighting. Everett watched from the hallway as the guests arrived. Marissa was pleasant, cheerful, utterly irrelevant. Malcolm was all charm, walking into Everett's home like it belonged to him. Conversation flowed, too easily. Sienna laughed at Malcolm's stories like she'd heard them before. Her hand brushed his arm once, deliberately. She looked at Everett afterward, just to see if he noticed. He did, but he smiled. Poured wine, made small talk. Observed. Midway through dinner, Sienna disappeared into the kitchen. Malcolm followed. Everett stayed with Marissa, who scrolled through vacation photos. From the kitchen, he heard a laugh. Low, private, he didn't move. When they returned, Everett offered Malcolm a chance to pick a bottle of wine from the pantry. "Back right corner," he said. There was only one bottle there. A rare Scotch Everett had hidden 4 years ago behind a stack of fake holiday tins. Not even Sienna knew it existed. Malcolm returned with that exact bottle, and Sienna didn't react. That was the moment, not the hand on the arm, not the laugh. That bottle told Everett everything. This wasn't speculation anymore. It was confirmation. Still, he said nothing. He smiled. Toasted the evening, cataloged every detail in his mind. Later that night, he sat in front of his laptop. Quiet, focused. He opened a new folder, encrypted it, labeled it discreetly, and began collecting. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about heartbreak. It was about knowing, because Sienna had made one fatal mistake. She thought Everett wouldn't see it, but he always noticed the small things. Everett didn't sleep much after the dinner. Not out of anger. He simply had work to do. He spent the next few nights collecting data. Nothing invasive, nothing illegal. Just facts. The router history showed Malcolm's phone had connected to their Wi-Fi. Twice. Once the night of the dinner, once 2 weeks before. Security footage from the garage matched the timeline. A tall figure, similar build, same car. He never rang the doorbell. He just waited. Then there were the bank statements. Sienna handled most of their finances. Her reasoning had always been simple. It's easier if one of us takes care of it. Everett never pushed back. He trusted her. Now he knew better. He noticed a transaction from a boutique wine shop, 146.32, just 2 days before Malcolm's visit. They hadn't hosted anyone in months. Sienna never bought wine that expensive without a discussion. The bottle Malcolm had selected from the pantry was listed right at the top of the receipt. Not a coincidence. The folder Everett was building on his computer started to grow. Footage, screenshots, receipts, location data, even traffic cam stills near Malcolm's office. One entry in particular stood out. A dentist appointment Sienna claimed to have, but her phone's GPS placed her near a tech incubator across town. The building was registered under a name Everett didn't recognize. Ardor Ventures, LLC. A public search revealed the truth. Malcolm Ashford, managing partner. Everett paused, then he found it. $940 transferred every 2 weeks from their joint account to Ardor Ventures. 4 months. No aliases, no disguises. Just a direct line of money from their home into Malcolm's business. It wasn't just betrayal, it was investment. This was planned, structured, and Everett was funding it. He didn't confront her, not yet. Instead, he set up 3 discrete cameras, one in the living room bookshelf, another in a decorative wall clock, a third, his favorite, inside a smoke detector in the kitchen. 2 audio recorders went into place that morning, one in the office under a stack of tax folders, the other in the living room. Then he told Sienna he had to fly to Denver for a client meeting. She didn't ask which client. She didn't care. He checked into a quiet Airbnb 15 minutes away under a fake name and opened his laptop. That Friday, the house stayed quiet. Sienna came home, poured wine, reheated something, and scrolled on her phone. Saturday morning was different. She spent over an hour getting ready. At 10:07 a.m., Malcolm's car pulled into the garage. He didn't knock. He had a key. Everett didn't react. He watched. Malcolm walked in like he lived there. Sienna met him in the hallway with a glass of wine. They kissed. Slow, comfortable. In the kitchen, right under the camera, Malcolm chuckled. He actually bought the Denver trip? Sienna smirked. Didn't even question it. They clinked glasses. He's probably off journaling or something, Malcolm said. Let him, she replied. We're almost done anyway. A few more months, and the business will be self-sustaining. What if he finds out? Malcolm asked. She didn't even pause. Then he'll leave, and I'll still walk away with more than half. They toasted again. Everett closed the laptop. No dramatic reaction, no boiling point, just stillness. He had what he needed. This wasn't a theory anymore. It was a confession. On camera, in stereo. She hadn't just lied. She'd built an exit plan, funded by the man she was leaving behind. The next day, Everett stayed in the Airbnb, watched them laugh, drink wine, pretend like the house was already theirs. Malcolm asked, You ever think he suspects? Sienna shrugged. If he did, he'd have done something by now. Everett notices patterns, not people. She was half right. He did notice patterns, but he had just noticed the last one he'd ever need. The pieces were in place. The story was written, and Everett finally understood the truth. She hadn't made a mistake. She'd made a calculation. Sunday afternoon, Everett returned home. He didn't rush. No bags, no confrontation, just a quiet walk through his own front door, the same way he had hundreds of times before. He hung up his coat, removed his shoes, and listened. Laughter drifted from the kitchen. Hers, light and airy. His, deeper, smug. Everett stepped inside. Nice vintage, he said. The sound of his voice cracked the room in half. Malcolm stiffened. Sienna froze, still holding a container of berries. You're back early, she said, voice thin. I know, Everett replied. The plane landed early. Lucky me. She opened her mouth, maybe to explain, but he raised a hand, not to silence her, just to stop the performance. You don't have to explain, he said. I've seen enough, heard more. He turned to Malcolm, who hadn't moved. You're in my house. You've used my key, my wine, and my wife's trust. That ends now. Malcolm stepped back, gauging whether to argue, but he saw Everett's expression, neutral, focused, and decided against it. Leave, Everett said. Malcolm placed his wine glass on the counter and left without another word. The front door clicked shut. Sienna didn't move. Everett turned to her. Sit down. She obeyed. You've been transferring money, our money, to his business. Over $7,000 in the last 4 months. Did you think I wouldn't notice? It's not what you think, she started. Don't, he cut in. You didn't just lie to me. You used me as funding, as cover, as a stepping stone to something you didn't even have the decency to hide. Her shoulders tensed, but she didn't deny it. I'm not here to shout, he continued. I'm here to settle this. He pulled a folder from his bag and placed it on the table. Inside was a typed agreement. Financial restitution, full repayment of the misused funds, no legal pursuit if paid in full within 3 days. Simple, clean. I can't pay that all at once, she said. If you don't, Everett said, this goes to my attorney tomorrow. All of it. Financial records, surveillance footage, audio. This isn't just infidelity, it's fraud. Sienna's eyes widened. You'd really take this to court? I'll take it as far as I need to. She looked down, silent. You were right about one thing, Everett added. I do notice patterns. But you mistook observation for passivity. That was your mistake. He stood. You have 3 days. She nodded, defeated. That night, Everett didn't sleep in the guest room. He didn't argue. He didn't linger. He reclaimed his space. Not with words, but with presence. And for the first time in months, he felt peace. Sienna didn't argue after that night. She didn't plead or push back. She didn't even try to explain. She just got quiet. Everett filed the paperwork 3 days later when the deadline passed without payment. His attorney moved fast. By the end of the week, a judge ordered the full return of misappropriated funds and stripped Sienna of any further claim to joint assets beyond the legal split. No drawn-out fight, no appeals, just signatures and a final court date. Sienna showed up dressed like it mattered, but her expression was unreadable. No apologies, no tears, just a nod when the terms were read aloud, and a brief, cold statement outside the courthouse. I'll be out in 2 weeks. Everett gave a short nod. Nothing more. That was the deal. The house felt different afterward, not empty, but clear. She stayed in the guest room. She stopped cooking for both of them, stopped speaking unless necessary. She moved through the house like a guest, her presence muted. Everett didn't speak much either. Not out of bitterness, but because there was nothing left to say. She would leave, and the space she took up would go with her. He kept to his routine. Coffee. Work. Walks in the evening. There was no outburst, no breakdown, just order returning where chaos had once crept in unnoticed. Sometimes she tried to speak. Soft observations about the weather, updates about the mail. He answered with nods, maybe a short word, but never more. They weren't partners anymore. They were two people waiting for the same door to close. Then came the final Saturday of her 2-week window. Everett hosted a dinner. Nothing elaborate, just a few colleagues, some music. Good food. He didn't invite Sienna, and she didn't ask. But when the guests arrived and laughter carried down the hall, she stepped out of the guest room, not to join, just to look. That's when she saw Adrian, the woman seated beside Everett. Calm, intelligent, the financial advisor he'd quietly hired 3 weeks earlier. Adrian laughed at Everett's dry humor, asked sharp questions, and listened with interest. Sienna lingered in the hallway longer than she probably meant to. Everett didn't acknowledge her. He didn't have to. The contrast said enough. After dessert, while the room buzzed with conversation and the smell of roasted garlic still hung in the air, Everett caught Sienna's eye. She didn't look hurt. She looked small. Not because someone had replaced her, but because she finally realized she'd removed herself. That night, she didn't try to make conversation. She returned to her room quietly, and Everett returned to his table, where every voice, every smile, every moment felt like a life already moving forward. Sienna moved out the following Thursday. No fanfare, no long goodbyes. A moving van arrived around 10 a.m. She didn't ask for help, and Everett didn't offer. She loaded her boxes in silence, mostly clothing, personal items, some framed photos she'd taken off the walls without a word. At one point, she paused at the doorway, holding a stack of files. You'll be glad it's done, she said. Everett met her eyes briefly. I already am. That was the last thing they said to each other. When the door closed behind her, Everett stood still for a while. The house didn't feel lonely. It felt honest. There was no tension in the walls, no double meanings in passing words, no manufactured normal, just quiet. In the days that followed, he didn't rush to redecorate or erase her. He didn't drown himself in distractions. He kept going. Work, workouts, errands. His routines became lighter somehow, more deliberate. Everything he did felt like it was finally for him again. He canceled the joint account, set up new passwords, cleaned out the files, changed the locks, not out of paranoia, but principle. The house was his again. So was his life. One evening, Adrian stopped by. They didn't talk about Sienna. They didn't need to. Adrian already knew enough. She'd seen the records, helped organize the settlement, helped navigate the financial recovery. What surprised Everett was how easily she transitioned from advisor to someone who asked about his weekend, who noticed the way he paused before speaking, who understood the difference between silence and absence. They had dinner, then another a week later. Nothing rushed, no agenda, just easy conversation between two people who had nothing to hide and no interest in pretending. Everett didn't tell her the whole story. Not yet, but one day he would. The final trace of Sienna came by mail, a signed confirmation that the final payment had cleared. No note, no apology, just a document. That too went into a folder, then into storage. A few months later, Everett sold the Glenbourne bottle. He didn't need a reminder of how it was found. He bought a new bottle, one he chose for himself, no memories attached. Sometimes people asked him if he regretted not confronting her sooner, not catching her in the act and demanding answers. But Everett never wanted fireworks. He wanted clarity, and he got it. Sienna walked out with a plan to leave him with less. Instead, she left with nothing but her own silence. Everett? He got his peace back, and this time, he wouldn't give it away so easily.